S-ranked hunters, also known as the strongest fighters in the solo leveling universe. Hunters whose power is so incredibly vast that the techniques that they use to measure power simply can't quantify how powerful they are. The true highest echelon of power in an already crazy powerful universe. These bastions of physical prowess, combat strength, or magical power are so vastly important in the solo leveling universe that nations use them as bargaining chips against each other. Because in a world where an S-ranked hunter can be as powerful as an entire nation's army, having as many of them as possible is pretty much the best way to make sure that nobody ever messes around with your country. And yet, even in solo leveling, a story that takes place in South Korea, it is established time and time again that a lot of the S-ranked hunters from Korea aren't really all that much to gawk at least comparatively to a lot of the other S-ranked hunters from other countries like Japan, China, India, or America, because fundamentally, not all S-ranked hunters are made the same way. Some are healers, some are snipers with a bow, some use fire magic, and some are national level hunters. Hunters with such an insane amount of strength that they're able to lead raids through S-ranked raids and come out unscathed. But even though Korea isn't necessarily hyped up as having the strongest S-ranked hunters, they are the S-ranked hunters we know the most about in solo leveling, especially after this most recent season, Season 2 of solo leveling, where all, or at least most of the S-ranked hunters from Korea banded together across their multiple different guild alliances and worked together alongside Japan and a large portion of their S-ranked hunters to finally clear out the S-ranked Broken Gate on Jeju Island. But I'm sure while watching this, many of you probably wonder to yourself, amongst all of these S-ranked hunters, who's the strongest? Is it Hunter Cha, Hunter Choy, Hunter Baek? Is it still Gojunhi, the president of the Hunters Association that sent them all there in the first place? And thus today I want to answer that exact question, because today we're talking all of the Korean S-ranked hunters ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys are looking for one additional Nick video a week, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're just finishing up the Land of Waves arc, and things are getting heavy. So, the Korean S-ranked hunters, they're all massively different from each other. Some are healers, some are archers, some are dancers, some are tanks. And while each and every single one of them does have their own specific abilities they bring to the battlefield, today we're going to be ranking them on straight up battle prowess. And thus, while some of the most important and valuable hunters on the battlefield are going to be a little bit lower on this list, it's just because they don't punchy that hard. And in no circumstance is that more true than our number 10 spot, and therefore our last place spot, Hunter Bjongu. See, coming from a place of literally no disrespect here, Hunter Bjongu is the weakest S-ranked hunter in all of Korea. And that's not because he's the only S-ranked Korean hunter who doesn't get to leave Jeju Island. That's because he's a healer, but the best healer in all of Korea. But outside of being able to do things like mend broken bones, fix ruptured organs, or regrow entire limbs for those who have lost them, Hunter Bjongu can actually bring a lot more to the battlefield than just healing, as it's seen in the manhwa, but not the anime, unfortunately. Hunter Bjongu, on top of making sure that nobody dies, is also able to grant his party massively important and helpful buffs. Buffs that range from a speed boost to a defensive boost to a strength boost. See, Bjongu takes pride in understanding the dynamics of his group, and therefore he capitalizes on what the people in his party are already great at and makes them even better at it. He gives tanks defensive boosts. He gives people like Hunter Cha speed boosts, and gives people like Hunter Baek, who play a more DPS role in raids, a strength boost. And so long as the group has Hunter Bjongu in their back line, they're effectively immortal. Oh, did the Ant King just rip off both your arms? Cool, I'll grow them back for you. Sorry I can't grow armor, but at least you have your arms. Oh, were you just backhanded so hard that your body became an actual macaroni noodle? Don't worry, I got you. And even though Bjongu is a pacifist and doesn't enjoy fighting, which absolutely contributes to him being one of the weaker S-ranked hunters we've ever seen, he establishes during the Jeju Island raid that he's actually at least in A rank when it comes to combat prowess, which allows for him to hold his own in melee combat against the soldier ants of the ant hive that they were invading. But really when it comes down to it, his true usefulness comes through the medium of his healing, which is why he's also putting time and effort into gaining stealth skills that make him completely invisible so he can pull himself away from the battlefield and heal from a distance. And if it wasn't for the other Korean S ranks blabbering about having him, and the Ant King's broken ability to see through his invisibility, Hunter Bjongu would have continued to live on as the greatest healer in all of Korea who objectively didn't heal anybody. So because he only has the combat prowess of an A ranked, and because he doesn't like to fight in the first place, unfortunately Hunter Bjongu is getting our last place spot. Now after Bjongu at the number 9 spot, we have Hunter Lim, or Hunter Lim Taegyu. Hunter Lim is the leader of the Reapers Guild, one of the strongest guilds in all of Korea. In fact, prior to Hunter Baek starting his own Hunters Guild, Hunter Lim and the Reapers Guild were actually the #1 guild in all of Korea. And Hunter Baek was actually a member of the Reapers Guild before he split off to start his own, the White Tiger Guild. Now, Hunter Lim is a ranger-type hunter, and the strongest ranger-type hunter in all of Korea. And his ability as hunter allows for him to make magical arrows from his fingertips, which obviously he can technically use without a bow. However, he becomes massively more powerful with a magical bow to shoot his magic arrows from. And thus, Hunter Lim is technically his happiest and at his strongest when, like Bjongu, he's far away from the combat. However, because of this, if the combat ever actually does come to Hunter Lim, he is at a severe disadvantage, which is not only put on display when he's one of the last Korean S-ranked hunters standing in the battle against the Ant King, who then proceeds to close the distance on him and beat him to a pulp, but also is additionally put on display earlier in the Jeju Island arc when Hunter Lim enters into a sparring contest with Japanese S-ranked hunter Minoru Hoshino, the longsword-wielding S-ranked Japanese hunter who watches Goto get decapitated by the Ant King and then kind of loses his mind. A hunter who himself actually isn't all that powerful so far as S-ranks go. And yet, because of Hunter Lim's inability to fight in close spaces, Hunter Hoshino was able to rather easily overwhelm him, which led to Hanakawa, an A-ranked hunter who came alongside the S-ranked hunters in their trip to Korea, to note that Hunter Lim may actually be one of the weakest S-ranked hunters on Earth. But still, Hunter Lim is a dangerous hunter, being able to produce up to 5 of his magic arrows simultaneously, which are powerful enough to be able to pierce the skin of the Ant Queen, an S-ranked monster. And with his precise marksmanship that allows for him to strike at the weak points of enemies, and his speed that allowed for him to keep up with other high-level awakened individuals like Hunter Hoshino, so long as Hunter Lim can dodge an opponent long enough to put some arrows in their weak spots, he's a pretty hard out. But not that hard compared to everybody else on this list, especially when compared to our number 8 spot, Hunter Ma, or Hunter Ma, also known as Hunter Ma Dong-wook. Hunter Ma is a tank, though technically not the strongest tank in Korea, or at least he doesn't have the highest peak out of any tank in Korea's history of S ranks. But we'll get into why he's not the strongest tank in the history of Korea a little bit later. Hunter Ma will be laid back and calm in nature, brings violence and brutality to the battlefield, matched by very few people in this story. See, Hunter Ma, outside of his abilities as a tank that allow him to pull aggro, focuses heavily on his gigantification techniques. A technique that allows for the already monstrous Hunter Ma to double his size, making him a quasi-giant, roughly 10 to 12 feet tall, who's able to bang with even the strongest and deadliest of opponents. And this gigantification allows for Hunter Ma to amplify his already crazy strength. Strength that allows for Hunter Ma to spar with the likes of Hunter Baek in his non-beast form, and completely stop the Ant Queen in her tracks when she tried to attack Bjongu. On top of this, his durability and pain resistance is very much becoming of somebody who should be one of, if not the greatest tanks in the history of Korea, as he was able to bounce back from the Ant King ripping off both of his arms and then treating him like Loki fighting against Hulk. And while I'm sure a fair amount of that had to do with Bjongu giving him arms again, if something rips off my arms and then treats me like a beanie baby, even if I do get healed, I'm not going to fight it again. However, even though Hunter Ma is regarded as one of the greatest tanks in Korea's history, he was rather easily dispatched by another power type S-ranked hunter in Kenzo, the Japanese S-ranked hunter, which led Hanakawa, the A-ranked Japanese hunter we talked about a second ago, to say even though his gigantification ability is impressive in terms of strength for an S-ranked tank, he's actually kind of mediocre. And just like Hunter Lim, maybe one of the weakest S-ranked hunters on Earth. And this is kind of a fair conclusion for Hanakawa to come to, considering the fact that Kenzo, the guy who basically effortlessly defeated Hunter Ma, was killed in one slash by the Ant King. Enough about the armless doll, let's talk about his sparring partner, because coming up at number 7, we have Hunter Baek. Hunter Baek is probably one of the most visible Korean S-ranked hunters in all of Solo Leveling. A character who we see pop into the story fairly often. As the president of the White Tiger Guilds, the biggest guild in all of Korea, Hunter Baek is pretty involved in the Solo Leveling story as he's constantly trying to recruit Jin Wu to his guild. However, on top of this, he is also one of Korea's strongest hunters. See, outside of Hunter Baek's base form being that of an incredibly powerful S-ranked hunter who's able to spar on par with the likes of tanks like Hunter Ma, Hunter Baek can also undergo a secret ability transformation, transforming into a magical beast resembling that of a tiger, which is where his guild name, the White tiger guild comes from. Now, we've actually seen a lot in terms of impressive feats from Hunter Baek. In the sparring matches with the Japanese S ranks, he was one-on-one against Hunter Kumamoto. And while he wasn't battling against Hunter Kumamoto in his berserk form, which is apparently strong enough that Jin Wu felt the need to step in when he started using it against Hunter Cha, Kumamoto was still very much on the run from Hunter Baek. However, after Kumamoto does end up running from Hunter Baek undergoes what is essentially a partial transformation and enters combat against the combined forces of Hunter Kenzo and Hunter Hoshino, two Japanese S-ranked hunters simultaneously. And while he does lose, that's better than basically anybody outside of maybe Hunter Cha could say in this sparring bout. And while the possible excuse to make here is that he didn't go 100% all out and turn into a full white tiger magical beast, Hunter Baek admits himself that even if he had gone all out in this fight, the result probably would have been the same. However, losing in combat against two S ranks simultaneously isn't really anything to scoff at, especially when you consider the fact that it's stated that a fully transformed Hunter Baek will be able to easily overpower the likes of people like Hunter Ma. On top of this, as Hunter Baek was able to keep up with the movements of Kumamoto, who's believed to be one of the faster people in the universe, tied with his insane durability that allowed for him to take multiple blows from the Ant King and survive, wrapped in the neat bow of his transformation that grants him abilities like Eye of the Beast, which gives him access to an enlightened state of sorts that allows for him to perfectly deduce how powerful an enemy is while also increasing his reflexes. And yeah, Hunter Baek is stronger than every other hunter we've talked about on this list, but he is the weakest out of the DPS category of Korean hunters. Well, I guess being a ranger still actually technically counts as DPS. So second weakest. But enough about the white tiger himself, let's talk about Korea's ultimate weapon, Hunter Choy at number 6. Hunter Choy is equal parts incredible mage and incredible genius, as his intelligence and strategic mind are just as important on the battlefield as his overwhelming firepower. And because of this, he's able to lead one of the strongest guilds in all of Korea, the Hunters Guild. And this is where his intelligence comes into play, because Hunter Choy isn't even the strongest hunter in his own guild. However, his leadership mentality paired with his intellect allows for him to remain at the top. But just because he's not the strongest hunter in his guild doesn't mean he's not incredibly strong. Hunter Choy is the strongest mage-type hunter in all of Korea, and is often implied to rival Hunter Baek in strength, which is why they're always butting heads. However, him and Hunter Baek are complete opposites. Well, see, because while Hunter Baek revels in melee combat, that's Hunter Choy's biggest weakness, kind of like with Hunter Lim. And thus Hunter Choy is severely lacking in things like speed, strength, and endurance, rather dumping all of his points into things like intellect or magical power, which is why it's stated in Solo Leveling that Hunter Choy at the peak of his power is able to destroy entire buildings with just one blast of his fire magic. And we've seen testament to this insane firepower time and time again, like in the Jeju Island raid, where he wiped out entire battlefields of ants just with a couple flicks of his fire magic. But it's so much more than just spamming fireball. Hunter Choy is able to regulate the temperature of his flames. He's able to change their shapes, control which way they burn, or simply turn them off. On top of that, his durability is 100% befitting of a high-ranking S-ranked hunter, as he was basically the only hunter from the Jeju Island arc who was able to take damage from the Ant King and keep moving, as pretty much every single other Korean S-ranked hunter was down and out when the Ant King got their hands on him. It was up to Hunter Choy to protect all of his injured comrades and try to find a way out. And mind you, he was doing all of this after spending an hour straight fighting using the highest level magical abilities he had access to. And this is why it's believed that Hunter Choy actually has one of the biggest mana pools in all of Solo Leveling, with only people like Jin Wu and national level hunters like Christopher Reed surpassing him. And this is on full display during the Jeju Island arc, as not only is Hunter Choy incinerating entire armies of soldier ants and using high level fire magic against people like the Ant Queen and the Ant King, but he's also the reason that a vast majority of those soldier ants weren't able to escape Jeju Island, as he covered the entire ant hive in a latticing of fire that worked as a sealing spell of sorts to keep all of the nonsense inside the hive. Ties into the fact that the anime added scenes of Hunter Choy using his fire magic on the helicopter to punch through the ants that were chasing after them, and that in the manhwa it was established that Hunter Choy would be able to destroy all of the ants that were coming to finish off the Korean S-ranked hunters. However, if he used that level of firepower, it would burn out all the oxygen in the hive. And yeah, Hunter Choy having the moniker of Korea's ultimate weapon makes a fair amount of sense. And while he doesn't believe he'd be able to wipe out an entire A-ranked dungeon by himself like Jin Wu, that's mostly because his skills are so singularly faceted. But enough about Korea's ultimate weapon, let's talk about the hunter who's in the guild run by Korea's ultimate weapon and is apparently stronger than him, because coming up at number 5, we have Hunter Cha. Hunter Cha is by far and away the strongest female hunter in all of Solo Leveling. Now, there's only like 3 of them that are focused on combat. It's not a female-heavy universe, but at the top of that list is Hunter Cha. See, Hunter Cha awakening to being an S-ranked hunter is kind of unfair. See, because the reason she's so incredibly powerful and often referred to as the dancer is because even before she had her awakening to becoming a hunter, she was a famous track athlete whose career was unfortunately stifled by a devastating ankle injury, but after retiring from the track, she awoke to become a hunter and an S-ranked hunter, and therefore she was able to use her literal years of high-level athletics to become one of the most powerful S-ranked hunters in the history of Korea. And that's confirmed, like, time and time again, that she is one of the strongest S-ranked hunters in all of Korea. See, not only in the Jeju Island arc, where she's kind of introduced for the first time in any combat capacity, is she the only one out of any of the Korean S-ranked hunters who's victorious in their 1v1, but also the 2 Japanese hunters, Kenzo and Hoshina, who very quickly win their 1v1s, identify that Hunter Cha is actually much more dangerous than Hunter Baek, and thus they team up to take down Baek so they can all work together to take out Hunter Cha. And this isn't the only time that Hunter Cha's strength has been on full display. Jin Wu actually believed when he first met Hunter Cha that she could be on the same level as Gojunhi, the literal president of the Hunters Association, widely believed to be the strongest hunter Korea ever had. Goto Ryuji, possibly the greatest hunter in the history of Japan, believed that she would be able to give even the strongest hunters from Japan a run for their money, and the Ant King identified her as the greatest threat amongst all of the Korean S-ranked hunters, which is why he attacked her first. On top of this, she was put forth by all of the other Korean S-ranked hunters to be the person who killed the Ant Queen, which she was able to decapitate with just one swing of her sword, though she was buffed by Bjongu. She was also able to draw blood from Kumamoto during their sparring match, and has actually, later on in the manhwa, sparred against Igris and won rather easily. And after she easily dispatches Igris, she actually goes on to fight against Biru, aka the Shadow Soldier version of the Ant King, whom she's able to dodge multiple attacks from, though it should be noted that Biru was holding back. And it's also worth noting, in a later arc, when Jin Wu eventually returns to the double dungeon, the only other person who's able to go blow to blow with the architect, you know, the big smiling thing, is Hunter Cha, which speaks to her absolutely insane durability. So yes, she very easily deserves our number 5 spot on this list. And trust me when I say putting her under our number 4 entry on this list does not feel good. See, I'd like to put into some perspective here that we're not talking about any of these hunters in either the revised timeline or in Ragnarok. 1, because that's like real spoiler territory, and 2, because, well, it's like an entirely different timeline. And while I do understand that Hunter Cha eventually receives national rank levels of strength, it's in the revised timeline, and I just don't want to talk about that right now. I probably shouldn't even bring up the revised timeline right now. Anyways, all that is to say, coming up at number 4, we have Hwang Dong-soo. What, Nick? That guy who got beaten down by Jin Woo's dad is number 4 on the list? Yeah, he is. Jin Woo's dad's really strong.
But Nick, Hwang Dong-soo isn't technically a South Korean hunter anymore. He moved to America.
I mean, he was born in Korea. He's on the list. And as my anime-only friends are gonna find out at the beginning of Season 3, but probably should have heard about at the end of Season 2, Hwang Dong-soo had a pretty good reason to join the Scavengers Guild. See, outside of the fact that the Scavengers Guild is headed up by Thomas Andre, the literal strongest hunter on Earth, the Scavengers Guild has access to a woman by the name of Nora Selner. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not Nora, it's Norma. And her presence in the Scavenger Guild is what enticed Hwang Dong-soo to leave Korea and join America. But why? Well, Hwang was already an incredibly powerful S-ranked hunter in Korea. However, Norma Selma has the ability to force a second awakening in hunters, and thus whenever the Scavenger Guild wants to recruit a high-profile individual to their guild, they simply entice them with the idea of more power, as Norma Selma is able to go to even the strongest of hunters and tinker with their strengths, unlocking their fullest potential and making even S-ranked hunters even stronger. And as he is the only S-ranked hunter in Korea who's undergone this second awakening, he deserves to be pretty high up on this list, even though we've never necessarily seen anything all that impressive from him. But if Hwang had managed to get his hands on Jin Wu before Jin Wu turned into the Shadow Monarch and one of, if not the strongest guy in the universe, Hwang would have very easily been able to destroy him. And see, Hwang is unfortunately saddled with fighting against the strongest people in the universe pretty much all the time. Whether that's him being commanded around by Thomas Andre, trying to fight Il Hwan Sung, or trying to fight against Jin Wu, time and time again, this insanely powerful asset to the Scavengers Guild finds himself in fights where he's outmatched. However, Hwang Dong-soo is one of the first S ranks we're ever introduced to and is often talked about being equal to a nation's army in terms of power, which is why somebody like Thomas Andre, who once again is the strongest hunter on Earth outside of Jin Wu, viewed him as such an incredible asset that he needed to bring him over to the Scavengers Guild and used one of Norma Selner's only 2 or so times she can upgrade somebody a year on him so early in his career as a scavenger. But enough about the bad guys, let's talk about the good guys. And talking about the good guys wouldn't be the same in a shonen anime if there wasn't some grossly overpowered old guy, which is why at number 3 we got Gojunhi. Gojunhi, also known as the president of the Hunters Association of Korea and as the strongest tanker in all of Korea's history, is our classic example of when he was in his prime, he was one of the strongest to ever do it, but he's no longer in said prime. In fact, if during the timeline of Soul Leveling, Gojunhi was in his prime form, there's a solid possibility that by the end of the storyline, he would have been the second strongest hunter behind only Jin Wu. See, because Gojunhi is something known as a vessel, and he is the vessel for the brightest fragment of brilliant light, aka he is a vessel for the strongest out of all of the rulers. Now, I've already done an entire video breaking down what the rulers are and what the monarchs are. I've even done an entire video ranking and explaining all of the monarchs. Basically, all you need to know is that there's evil gods and there's good gods. The monarchs are the evil gods, the rulers are the good gods. And every single ruler has a vessel, and the strongest out of all of the rulers' vessel is Gojunhi. However, unfortunately, because of his age and his declining stamina, Gojunhi doesn't have the stamina to maintain this level of strength for as long as he used to. But it's believed in a short, quick battle, Gojunhi could probably overpower anybody in Korea, and maybe anybody in the world, as by channeling the power of the strongest ruler, Gojunhi could actually pretty easily be a national level hunter, but like I said, too old. However, even in his old decrepit age, Gojunhi has shown the ability to fight on par with monarchs, who are the strongest entities in the entirety of the Soul Leveling universe, Ragnarok not included. So on account of the fact that he had the potential to be one of, if not the strongest character in the show, but age had something to say about that, Gojunhi gets our number 3 spot. Now, our number 2 spot is kind of a weird one, because coming up at number 2 we have Sung Il-hwan, aka Jin Woo's father, the initial Shadow Monarch. Now here's the thing, Sung Il-hwan is technically never measured as an S-ranked hunter, but that's only because the ranking system hadn't been deployed during his time as a hunter, but he is absolutely an S-ranked hunter, and he was an S-ranked hunter before he underwent a second awakening. Yes, that's right, just like Hwang Dong-soo, who Il-hwan lays out in just a couple of seconds, leveling an entire city block as he absolutely manhandles one of the strongest S-ranked hunters on Earth, Hunter Il-hwan underwent a second awakening, but his was very different from Hunter Dong-soo's. See, when Jin Wu was still a young boy, Il-hwan was deployed to an S-ranked gate, implying that before he even went into the gate, he was an S-ranked hunter. However, unfortunately for Jin Wu, who maybe wanted a father, Il-hwan would get stuck in this gate for 10 whole years, until eventually Il-hwan was saved by the rulers, and after being saved by the rulers, was given a second awakening by them. But this isn't even where the power-ups end for Il-hwan, as after undergoing his second awakening from the hands of the good gods of the universe, Il-hwan also became a vessel for one of the rulers, stacking additional power on what was already a pretty outrageously powerful character, making Sun Il-hwan pretty immediately the second strongest character in the entire universe, though he's never recognized as an S-ranked hunter or even a national level hunter. But let me be entirely clear, he is at the level of a national ranked hunter. See, not only was he able to lay out Dong-soo Hwang in just a matter of seconds, but also much later in the manhwa, he's able to battle against 2 monarchs simultaneously. And while he, like Gojunhi, isn't necessarily the best fit for his ruler vessel ship, he's able to leverage the power of that vessel ship to battle against 2 of the strongest entities in existence. And to put that into perspective, Thomas Andre, who prior to the reveal of Il-hwan and Jin Woo's rise to power, wasn't able to battle against on even footing against even 1 monarch. So yeah, not only is Sung Il-hwan the second strongest Korean hunter of all time, he's probably the second strongest hunter, period, of all time. But coming up at number 1 is, yeah, obviously Jin Wu. Listen, for the sake of not revealing literally the entire plot of Solo Leveling, let's just go over what Jin Woo's already accomplished in the anime. Things that literally no other Korean S-ranked hunter outside of maybe his father would be able to accomplish. Jin Wu cleared an entire A-ranked gate by himself, fought against a bunch of high orcs who were probably too powerful to be in an A-ranked gate to begin with, cleared 100 levels of a demon castle, and then at the top of that 100th level of said demon castle, fought against a system-generated copy of one of the monarchs, whom he defeated, mind you, in one-on-one combat, though he was helped by his little... I think she was a demon girl. He then proceeded to teleport out of the blue into the Jeju Island raid in time to battle against and embarrass the Ant King, who was so powerful he was able to decapitate Goto Ryoji in 2 strikes, when Japan very much believed that Goto Ryoji was their best shot at achieving a national level hunter, of which there is only 4 at this current moment in solo leveling, and we haven't even begun to dip a toe into the crazy things that Jin Wu is about to accomplish. Especially now that he has Biru, his first ever Shadow Soldier created from an S-ranked monster, a being so powerful that it was able to wipe out all of the other S-ranked hunters that it came across, that has now become a Shadow Soldier and therefore has the ability to continuously improve upon itself. On top of that, he already has access to some of his more powerful Shadow Soldiers like Tusk, Iron, and Igris, who are also constantly improving in terms of strength, and whom all already probably represent S-ranked levels of combat prowess. So yeah, Jin Wu is the strongest S-ranked hunter in the history of Korea, but spoiler here, he's also the strongest hunter in human history. I hope that doesn't ruin the story of solo leveling for you. But if it does, tell me about it in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, somebody's being incredibly clingy, and I don't know, maybe he needs to chew on something.